Hi, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about major and minor scales. It's going to be actually a lot of fun, even though it does involve some theory skills. But we'll talk about why that's so important. Most of the time, singers just don't know what they're singing, and it just makes you feel very constrained, right? Like you have to memorize everything and be very, very careful. And so we'll talk about how you can be, different strategies for getting more familiar with major and minor scales. These are the two most common scales that we're going to come across. So just know that like once you master these two scales and your ability to switch between the two, you're actually going to have so many different tools to work with. You're going to be able to learn pieces better. But the other thing is the secret sort of skill that you get from major and minor scales in general is you're able to improvise better, and I'll show you how to do that. It's a cool way to mix up your practice, actually. I every once in a while I talk about this, like really structured drills versus actually giving yourself some time to free sing. And this is a great way to get better at understanding the differences between the different modes in general. So major and minor scales are the kind of the two foundations, and then from there, when you start to mix them up, you can get all these really cool sounds, and it's just going to give you so many more options to play with. I find it to be a really nice way to practice in general. So first, I'm going to go through the ground rules of what makes something major and minor, different ways to approach it, and then we'll go into all of that sort of stuff in terms of how we train it and actually use it as exercises, right? So we can like understand the theory of it, but we want these physical sort of practical skills, and that's where it starts to be really cool. So yeah, so get on your thinking caps. This is a lot of focus required, but there's also like a sensation of dropping into each of these modes. So let's talk about the differences. When we're talking about scales in general, just to give us this foundation, this is the set of notes that we do in a single key. So there's actually like just a set of notes that we're going to be singing, and they have this particular relationship to them. And all of our melodies and basic songs are going to be sort of just one of these sets. And we'll talk about sort of what defines the differences between the two. So all of our scales are made up of these basic units of music theory, our whole steps and our half steps. And it gets more sort of weirder in other traditions and gets more specific with like microtonal stuff. But as far as like Western music, think of these as the basic building blocks. Our half step being the smallest interval, and then our whole steps being two of those half steps together. So even there, you just want to make sure that you have a sense of that. So with like an online tuner or a piano, if you play a note like this and you're able to match it, like just the next key up is going to be your half step. So and two of these make up a whole step. So we've got a whole step being and a half step being exactly half of all of those, right? It makes it very intuitive, but you want to actually like sing through this and feel it out. So so these are these basic units. Sometimes I have some exercises that are particular about just getting comfortable with the difference between half steps and whole steps. Yeah, we're gonna talk about this in terms of intervals and everything that you're practicing. This is all gonna play a role, and we'll talk about sort of where intervals fit into stuff. So our major scale, let's start there, and then we'll get into the minor scale. Basically, what you want to really understand is that there are more whole steps in our basic scales, like major and minor, than there are half steps. So you really want to think about actually just where are the spots where there are half steps, and in each scale there's two spots. So in terms of major and minor, right? So for major, if you actually are looking at a piano, it's designed with the major scale in mind. And so where you have sort of a separation from your black notes, right? And you just go from one white note to another white note, that's where your half step is. And you can see there's two of them if you're looking at a piano, or you can pull up like an online keyboard or even just a picture of a keyboard. And you can actually see that. And so I'm going to do a lot of this in C, which is these white notes for major. So that's a good context if you don't have any piano skills. And we'll talk about sort of how you can visualize this without even the piano. Um, but what we want to know is that major scales have a half step between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. So if I've got this scale going from C to C, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where the half step is. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7 and 8 is the other half step. And bear with me, this is all going to build off of itself, and it gets really cool. But I just want to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody out. So if you're feeling like, oh, this is all basic stuff, trust me, it's going to get cooler and cooler. But this way, you can actually kind of go through it very methodically. So the thing that happens is people tend to mess up where the change of half steps are, right? If between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, they sort of mess up on either side because they feel a little different. I'm going to do this sort of interesting technique, which is I like to think of like a whole step as like a bigger bracket, and then I'm going to put my hands together for a half step. This is sort of like an abridged version of what people do with solfege, but solfege can be kind of complicated when you're doing like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And you have to remember all of these different shapes, and it can just be a lot. So sometimes it's not as functional at first. So just think of it like this. There's only two different options, right? Whole steps and half steps. And these are the spaces from one note to the next, right? So that's what we mean by intervals. So we've got from 1 to 2, we've got a major second or a whole step. We go 1, 2, and then 2 to 3, 2, 3, also a whole step, and then 3, 4, half step, so think smaller, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, and then 7, 8. So what I'm talking about here seems kind of simple, but you really want to start visually mapping out your scales. Yeah, so if you don't understand even just like what the notes are, a lot of this we can actually do by imitation and your ear, because we hear a lot of music all the time, and the major and the minor scale are the two most common patterns. So we'll talk about how you can even start to improvise, but it does take a little bit of understanding of these scale degrees, and you can start it anywhere in your range, really. So like you could just pick a note and start building this out, rather than thinking about like having to know an exact scale on the piano. Uh, but I highly recommend like we'll do some exercises that are going to help us get better at this. And often like just by working with a teacher, singing through the exercises, you're starting to learn intervals and what they feel like. And then from there, this will get easier and easier. So just know that this is a little bit further down the line, but you might actually start to get this just intuitively by following along, and feel out these sort of different shapes, right? So that's what I'm trying to get people to see and actually visualize as they do this, is actually kind of giving yourself like a hand gesture for a bigger step versus a smaller step, a whole step or a half step. In fact, you can also like write it down is really helpful. Like you can just write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? We always have these 7-note scales that by the 8th note, they come back to the same note again. So from C to C. This is might seem like overwhelming, but it's an intuitive sort of fact that we feel that ma, ma, octaves feel like they kind of fit together, right? And that's why we give them the same letter name. So if I would recommend for understanding that sort of foundation, checking out some of the like basic music theory 101 stuff that we do in our content. I'll make sure to do one of those videos at some point too. So that'll help you. And then you can kind of come back to this one. I'll be like, oh, this makes way more sense. So it's a progressive thing, right? We're learning a language. So what I recommend is actually write down the numbers, practice jumping between them. And I always, when I'm thinking about whole steps or half steps, I make like a bracket or a little caret, like a little point. And I'm kind of showing that here as I do this. So first note, we start with our 1 and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And and then practice going backwards. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what you can see is I'm just keeping track of where it switches to that smaller note, right? That's going to be where you tend to get off for most people when they're just learning the scales. So notes between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 is where we have that one change. And that's going to be really helpful. And one thing, just as an aside, when we're singing numbers, it can kind of feel uncomfortable on the face. Like I just know this from experience. So just, you don't have to like pronounce the number perfectly as you're doing this. Think of it as like just let it be floppy, because sometimes we'll build in this tension if we're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, you don't need to do that. You can think of it as just keeping track of it in your head, right? Eventually, we want to just do this counting in our head without actually saying the numbers, but you can just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just let it be floppy. You don't have to make that perfect. It's more about matching these pitches. Now, that's our major scale. What I recommend as a practice for any scale, and we'll do this with our minor scale as well, is doing something what we call as a bungee scale exercise. So what we're doing here is we're starting with our first note, we're going up one note, and then we come back, and then we go up one more note, and then we come back, and we're always coming back to our first note, because a lot of times when we get out of tune, it's when we like slowly drift away from our 1 or our 8, which is the same note. It's just an octave higher. So that's what I'd recommend. In fact, if you're not used to doing this, singing just on your own, you might not even realize you're drifting. So I recommend holding a drone note. You'll see this a lot in some videos, right? They'll put on like a fancy sort of like strings thing and be like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. That way you can feel sort of the drone. We'll do this a little later just for some extra vibes, but for now, let's go back to our regular piano, and we're just gonna go, this is our bungee scale. So try practicing this with me. Eventually you'll get a lot faster at it, but we're going 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, welcome. So this is a way that we just get really comfortable with these notes. Eventually, you can kind of do it like this to a rhythm and be like 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so this is kind of, Supermax, this is kind of the idea is we're understanding more of like the relative function, and it'll just help you generally get a sense of like the mode that you're in. And then, yeah, from there, you can really practice like extra refining your pitches, but it's more about thinking about like larger and smaller at first. Like, we all have to start somewhere, and just getting really comfortable with what it feels like to be in a major scale versus a minor scale. Now, once you get really comfortable doing these kinds of bungee scale things, then you can start to just practice jumping around. The next step is to do an interval-based jumping. Oh, hi, I know you probably just showed up. So what we're talking about right now is we are just reviewing our major scale, doing a kind of an exercise to help just get more comfortable with the notes and moving together, trying to keep them always connected to our first note so that we don't drift away from them. So I'm kind of playing that note at the same time. It's a way to practice understanding the features of our major scale. And what we were talking about are there are half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And those are the two spots that are different from everything else being whole steps. And so keeping track of those changes is really important. And when we talk about the minor scale, keeping track of the two spots that are there are half steps for that is also going to really help you understand that scale and then eventually switch between the two. So it's a lot to practice here. It gets more comfortable with time, but just know that major and minor scales, these two scales, are the two most common things in music that we find. So all of our melodies, often most of the chords that we're playing are based off of just a single scale in a simple song. And so that's what we're getting used to. And then eventually this is going to lead us to our ability to improvise, which is really, really fun. Yeah, ask away. That this is the whole point, and we've got some time. So please, like with theory, it's important to really understand sort of the ground rules, and that can be really tricky in terms of jumping in. So ask that question. I'll keep going, and then I will answer it when it comes. Um, what we're doing again is we're practicing. Oh yeah, okay, great. I love it. So when people are talking about accidentals, we're essentially talking about we have to have these two different ways that we start to name our notes. So our basic, like, it's not quite the same as minor, and this is where it gets confusing. It's sort of like how we spell things is like a nice way of thinking about our language with music. We have to start somewhere, and so C is kind of like our basic template for like sheet music. If you see sheet music and there are no accidentals written in, it's telling you it's our default key, C major. And the piano is built this way to show you that, with all the white notes. So that's like a way of thinking about it is we have this relative spot, and then we start using accidentals to name particularly notes that are far away from C or in between the notes with C. So like in the simplest sense, it seems like it's just the black notes are accidentals compared to white notes, but it gets to be more complicated than that. Think of it like this. It's a system. If I have like a C, I'm playing the C, and I go one half step higher, da, da, I can call that a C sharp. And so it's a way that we designate some of these in-between notes based off of our basic C scale. And then from there, it helps us understand all the other notes. So it's confusing, right? Because accidentals are a context-based thing. And just know that like our natural notes that don't have accidentals are all based in C. And then we start to have accidentals as we start to do more complicated things. But I don't want to go like too deep into that because it can start to throw people off. But just know that like it's a way that we look at in between notes based on our what I call like our cardinal letters, like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The notes that are in between, and if you're looking at a piano, you'll see, hey, there are notes in between those notes. That's in its simplest sense how we start to read accidentals. So again, like C, C sharp. This note, if I look at it from the other direction, D, D flat. It's either C sharp or D flat, depending on how I'm looking at it and in what context. But that's going to start to really freak people out. So we'll get to that later, and it's helpful to see that as a visual thing. And I'll talk about it when we talk about minor a little bit. So that'll start to make more sense. So let's go back to what we're practicing, which is just getting familiar with our major scale. Sing through it, feel it out. If this is not a comfortable key, you can do it starting from any note and just do this same relationship of whole steps and half steps. So where we were practicing the spongy scale thing, going 1, 1, 2, 1, going up 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, one scale degree at a time, then coming all the way back. Now, another way you can think about doing this is instead of stepwise, you can do it just with intervals. And this is going to start to help us with jumping around. As someone was mentioning, what kind of interval training should I do? First, start from the context of 1, moving up to every other scale degree in this bungee pattern. And then it'll start to get easier, and you'll actually start to be able to kind of just jump around. So here we're going like this. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 4, 1, 1, 5, 1, 1, 6, 1, 1 7 1 1 8 1. So you can see it's always about coming back to 1, but every time I'm extending up 1 scale degree higher. You can see why you would want to do the stepwise one first before you start practicing jumping like this. Now, we give each of these intervals a name based off of this major scale pattern pretty much. As I again, like with theory, just know that I'm purposefully like just with certain things when we're teaching, like we don't want to over explain certain things because we'll start to get kind of lost. So we just need to understand the system, and then from there we can get more detail as you get more advanced. So with this, just think of it like essentially we've got certain intervals that are named major intervals. There's also some intervals that we call perfect intervals, and this is going to help us start to understand the difference between minor and major. So 1 and 8 we call perfect unison or perfect octave because they don't change depending on major or minor. Now we've got 1 to 2, that's a major second. And that this will get a little confusing at certain points, but it'll generally kind of help you understand this. We've got 1 to 3 is a major third, and then we go 1 to 4, and we call it a perfect fourth. And the reason is because it doesn't change between these two modes. It's at least a nice, simple way of understanding this at first. Then we have 1 to 5, which we also call a perfect fifth. So that also is not going to change. Then 1 to 6, major 6, 1 to 7, major 7, and then to our octave. So you'll notice that we have 1, 4, and 5 get this special P, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect unison. And then we have, our second, our third, our sixth, and our seventh, we call them major intervals. Now, it's not going to be perfect with this, but it's going to help you start to keep track of some of the notes that don't change. It's funny with this, we want the system to be like super like logical, and there are some irregularities. In fact, like these kinds of scales that we do are technically not symmetrical, right? And in fact, that gives them motion. That's partially why we like these patterns, and we have for thousands of years. So just know that we're just trying to better understand them from different angles, but it's not going to like fit like perfectly in a bow like what you would want. But it's really important to understand that the root, the 1, the 4, and the 5 are not going to change between major and minor patterns. So let's start to talk about our minor pattern a little bit, and then we'll go from there. And some of this, again, like it might feel really foreign at first, and then as you start to do this more and you understand the difference between the two, it actually helps you even understand each pattern itself, right? Based on its relationship to everything else. So sometimes you just got to throw yourself in with theory. It kind of freaks people out, but it's like a language, right? So immersive language, or do you do it like bit by bit? It's a little bit of both. If you're asking what instruments I play, so I sing, obviously, play piano and guitar and ukulele because I teach young kids sometimes, and that's really helpful. It's different vibe. It's good to kind of as a starter instrument. So mainly those like accompaniment style instruments, and then the voice. So let's jump back into this. So with a nice way of thinking about our sort of entryway into the minor pattern is to think about this special relationship between major and minor. We have this thing called the relative major or relative minor, and they share the same key or the same white notes. And so what you can do is in your pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you have that spot 6 and you're comfortable with it, that is the starting note for our minor pattern. So I'm going to take it down lower, 6 down here, and then I'm going to call this my 1. So this is a way of thinking about sort of relative numbers. This is my new scale. It's from A to A, but it's all just white notes. And you'll notice because I did that, the spots on the piano, if you're looking at a piano or you pull up a picture of a keyboard, because it's really helpful to visualize this, and a keyboard is very logically laid out, sort of linear, right? It's nice to see this. What you'll see is that those spots where there aren't any black notes, those half step spots are now shifted over, right? They're in a different position, and it goes 1, 2, and then right here between 2 and 3, that B and C, that spot right there, is where the half step is. It's now in a different spot in this scale. So it's 1, 2, 3. 2 and 3 is a half step spot. And then 4, 5, 6. 5 and 6 is our half step spot. 7, 8. So what we get is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's kind of a matter of focus. Do I start that as my 1 to 1, or do I start it off of C? And is that my 1 to 1? And that's going to be a difference between the relative major and the relative minor. Um, so, uh, is being the singer everything you've always wanted? Life is complicated, right? And singing is a beautiful thing. So I wouldn't say that I ever would know everything that I've always wanted, because it's always changing every day. So um, so this is the cool thing, is we didn't change really the key. Actually, we changed it from A minor to C major, but these two actually share the same white notes, and so they're actually in the same key. And this is the beginning of understanding modes. We'll get to that a little bit later. But C and A are both in the same key, but now I'm just starting from A, which in C again was my sixth scale degree. I'm going to start that as my 1, and that is going to be the beginning of this minor pattern. This is a nice way of understanding, and I'll show you when we start improvising why this is so important and kind of why I'm doing it this way first. So we just need to understand, again, the main features here. We've got 1, 2, 3, that little half step spot. So I'm going to do this little visualization thing that I've done. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So all of a sudden, we have half steps in a different spot, and it feels like a different relationship, right? We have this new quality, right? People often talk of minor as kind of sounding sad, right? That's sort of the simplest sense of it, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, versus major sounding like happy, right? And a little uplifting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can start to think of that as like they have this quality to them, and it's because of this relationship of whole steps and half steps. Now let's do our practice, right? We're gonna do the bungee pattern with our A minor scale, and just get used to it. And again, if you don't know the names and everything like that, you can still follow along and feel out sort of the pattern and sensation of this. So it's going 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, what we have here, and I'm going to go through the next one, which is doing the interval jumps. I'm going to name intervals. And again, it'll feel like a little weird because some of them are still called major intervals, but there are some that shift to minor intervals, and pay attention to which ones shift. That's the best way I can throw you into all of this without being like, okay, how is this making sense? Because again, it's a little less like 100% perfectly logical, unfortunately. So we're going to go like this. Now we have, I'm going to go with our intervals going 1, 1, major second, 1, and then 1, minor third, 1, 1, perfect fourth, 1, 1, perfect fifth, 1, 1, minor sixth, 1, 1, minor seven, 1, 1, 8, 1. So you could hear there were some of these notes that were different. We've got a minor third all of a sudden, a minor sixth, and a minor seven. These are the notes that are different between major and minor. And because of that shift, all of a sudden the half steps are in that particular position, and we get this particular sound. So what's cool about this is once you get really comfortable, and again, you might be like, oh, whoa, I'm getting a little too deep in here. But just remember, this is like a physical skill. And we're practicing naming things. So if you're just playing around with your C major scale, like we did, which is kind of like a nice root, yeah, so there are major seconds in our minor scale because there are some other scales that actually get even more minor in a sense. But just know that it's really the major and minor is this weird simplification for the modal system, which is understanding that every key has all these different options. If you start from any note in that key, you can get all these cool patterns. This is why jazz players can do all sorts of cool stuff. And just know that it's because there's more information, but just hold on to the relative information here, and it'll make sense as we go along. But I don't want to go too advanced because again, this already is probably like feeling like a lot for people. So what I want you to practice is once you're comfortable with major and minor, what you want to do is practice, like, let's just stay in C major. And I'm going to practice moving around. I'm going to take the numbers away, but I'll tell you where I'm getting to a specific number. So, like, for example, I might start to just with C, like, quiz myself and just try to jump around to different intervals and then get used to just kind of like improvising in C major and improvising in A minor. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go like, I'll start with numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 5, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 1. And I'm just playing around with jumping around sometimes doing just stepwise. And then I'm going to go like this now that I have this. I'm going to go na 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 na. The majoriness of the major scale just by singing it. And follow along with me, right? Like, na 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 na. Na 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 ba da 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 da. Right, that's our majory feeling. Just feeling a sing-songy melody, trying to get in that context. Now I'm gonna do one based off of this A minor, this relative minor, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 7, 6. I'm holding on to that 6, and I'm just gonna focus on staying anchored around this note, going like da 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 da. Yeah, this is exactly right. It's really fun, and it's actually a great way to just start to intuitively understand music theory. So now I'm just focusing on this note, and I'm gonna go like da da da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6, 5, 7, 1. Right, same numbers, but again, I'm using this now for this minor pattern, and it sounds like this. Da 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 da. It has this particular kind of vibe. Again, if you're new to this, just try singing it out and feeling that difference between da 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 da, that minor pattern, and this. Da 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 da. It's all a matter of, it's the same exact relationships, but it's just a matter of where you think of your focus. So I could start to practice kind of jumping around between these two, just going like da 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 da. Do you see how it's actually about the emphasis? It's like where I stop. And if I think of it now, okay, I'm going off of that note and I'm kind of thinking of that as my anchor. That's why I do those bungee scales. And I think of that particular spot as the root. All of a sudden, it feels different, right? So it's just really important to start to understand this, that it's all about sort of this relative perspective. Um, and so being able to sort of visualize this is really important. So you might be like, this is really confusing. Again, I highly recommend draw out the numbers going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and maybe keep going, like go, at 1 or 8, keep going. So like 1, 7, 6, 5, right? Or like, oh yeah, we'll get to the other minor scales. You're jumping ahead, which I love. And again, this is what's always this interesting game, right? Is like some people are starting with just their intuitive sense of music from listening and haven't jumped into doing all of this singing practice and like training other instruments and stuff. So that's a very far away thing. And then some people like Florista, like I can tell like harmonic minor and melodic minor and all these other complexities. We'll get to that, and I'll show you sort of how you can kind of intuitively find yourself there, which is I think a really cool practice. Sort of like I have a goal in mind, and just to show you this again. Sometimes we have to watch this over and over again, add it with some other videos for it to really make sense in the world of music, because we're taking one sort of specific aspect, which is moving between major and minor. So let's talk about this. So yeah, what I was gonna say is really write out the numbers like a number line and practice jumping around, and then make sure you put a spot between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And then even if you're just looking at 6 and you're just singing from 6 to 6, you'll start to see that that's actually the minor pattern. And under that, you can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from A to A, and you'll start to see that they're overlapping. You might want to do it with like hand signals, but I think writing it out is a really great way to start to visualize this if you're not looking at a piano. But what I'm doing here is we're looking at on the piano where those two white notes are, where there isn't a black note between them. And when we shift where that is, we get a new relationship of whole steps and half steps. There are these two spots that are really important that create the major scale and the minor scale. And that's in the key of C. If we're thinking about this, we've got our 1, C, and then we've got our 6, which is A. And that's that relationship that gives you those patterns. So we call it the relative major and the relative minor. And you can sing the same notes over and over again, all just the white notes on the piano. And be like da 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 da, ya da 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 da, and that's like a major thing. And then 1, 7, 6, da 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 da. Da 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 da. So if you trade sort of the emphasis and you really visualize it, you can actually start to make them sound slightly different, even though I'm singing just the same notes. Like if you're listening to this and like putting it on like a pitch tuner thing, you'll see I'm just going over basically what are all the notes that don't have accidentals right now. So that's why I'm doing this. So our cardinal letters, just all the white notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah, that's a helpful way to visualize this at first, right? So eventually you're gonna want to understand this more conceptually, and we're gonna get there. But this is just a way that I'm trying to help those who haven't had experience with this start to understand how to visualize things. It's just one sort of level of it. Now, let's start to talk about sort of like this concept of um, solfege. When people talk about solfege, and I'm not going to go through explaining the whole thing. We'll do that another time. It's for a whole other lesson. But it's just another way of doing this sort of counting thing. It's keeping track of the scale degrees. And the reason solfege is helpful is because we have different symbols for these major and minor intervals. And it helps us keep track of those changes so that I'm not just doing like, um, resetting one everywhere in all these different places. It's kind of like a little overwhelming. So let's talk about the next layer of understanding this, which is going to help, which is understanding the difference between parallel major and parallel minor. Again, like what now? It's just different approaches, all these fancy terms. This is like if I'm playing on C and I'm trying to make a major scale from C to C and a minor scale from C to C, I'm going to start to see the relative differences between the two in a little bit of just a more obvious way. So with this, when I'm doing this, there are 3 notes that change to accidentals from C to C minor to C major. We essentially have our minor third, minor sixth, and our minor seventh. Those things change from their regular major third, major sixth, and major seven position. So when I'm going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's 3, 6, and 7. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put a half step there. I'm going to think about constructing the scale and put the half step there. Remember, it's between 2 and 3 for minor. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 and 5 are the same. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it's instead of 6 and 7 being major, I'm going to go 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Versus again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's like, what is this magic? I'm taking these notes, the 3 and 6 and 7 with major. So I'm taking those notes and I'm pushing them one half step down, and they go. So if you know the difference between where the half steps are between major and minor, you can just make that calculation as you're singing. So know again that major, it's between 3 and 4, and 7 and 8. And minor, it's between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. So if I make that change, I'm able to actually switch between the two. Let me answer this. So in major, you sing the note, and in the minor scale, you take the black note before them. In this case, yeah, in the case of C, and just know that that's the keyboard helps us visualize things. It's good to learn it in C, and then it's really just understanding the differences between the whole steps and half steps. So it'll look different in every sort of key context, but you have to keep track of the calculating. So there's this really fun game that you can do, even if you don't understand this. It's practicing trying to like go between major and minor on a single, on like just a like open fifth. Like I'll just play C and G, so it's ambiguous. This is the perfect intervals, right? I don't need to put in 4 because that's just a little extra, but I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna practice going. Okay, maybe major, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Da 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 da. That improvising thing. Na 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 na. Now da da da. If I know I have to lower the third, that's going to help me get into this minor pattern. And if you're used to singing minor, you'll probably finish the rest of it. But da 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 da. So what you can start to do when you get comfortable jumping between them like that on the same octave is you can practice just sort of mixing them up. This might feel really daunting, but this is how you actually understand. I think it's a cool way of understanding modes. They're kind of like these weird Frankenstein hybrids of major and minor patterns. And then some of them get weirder from there, but this is a nice way of sort of jumping into it. So if I'm just playing my open fifth, I could be like, na 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 na. See, I put major on the bottom, minor on the top, right? Na 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 na. That's not even really. That's sort of I just kind of creating my own construction of a thing. But when you start to trade these out, you can start to find all these weird sort of mixes and interesting harmonies and stuff. So I could be like, da 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 da. So that'd be like doing da na 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 na. Right, I could kind of like mix and match and try to make just one change and not all of them. And all of a sudden you start to get all these really cool things. So like someone, Florista, you mentioned like harmonic minor, melodic minor. So the simple answer there is like, melodic minor, you're essentially doing minor going up. And then once you get to 5, you just switch to major. So it's like going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sometimes we get kind of twisted up. So we're essentially na 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 na, and trying to switch back and forth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, and that's where I'm finding that switch. The other one, harmonic minor, is it's just only the 7 is major and the 6 is minor. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Na 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 na. So that's a really great one to practice sort of improvising on, right? Na 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 na. Na 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 na. It makes sense for certain kind of harmony things, and so that's a whole other thing when you're thinking about like playing on top of it. But this is sort of the game that I'll try to do is practice sort of jumping between the two. It takes a lot of focus, and it's really, really helpful ultimately for just your ability to effortlessly change from mode to mode, and sort of like mix it around. And then, the main thing that I would say is when you're trying to switch into a new sort of sound, kind of think of the main features that change, and that's your best way of really making it sound clearly in that interval compared to like just some of the regular other notes, right, that are more ambiguous, like the perfect fourth, perfect fifth. But that's so that's one thing, is so understanding where it changes is actually how you kind of like learn to sing into the pattern. And then like the other thing is to think about sort of where your root note is in that context. So the like 1, 5 is kind of like a nice architecture, and then you can practice making these changes. So like 1, 5, 6, 5. 1, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, da na 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 na. Right. Versus da 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 da. And so as you start to learn how to kind of like switch between whole steps and half steps, you essentially are learning and understanding all of what modes are, which is just these different combinations of these patterns. But start with major and minor. And then go from there, because again, like you can get really confused pretty quickly. So again, there's a whole pattern that we're going through, right? The first thing is just singing your major scale. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and understanding where those half steps are between 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. And then you can actually, within the same scale, this is why I'm doing it this way, you can find the minor pattern by going 1, 7, 6. Now turn that into 1 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're learning your minor pattern that way. And from there, you can see 1, 2, 3. That's where that half step is. And then 1, 5, 1, 5, 6, 5 is where that other half step is. Once you understand that as a context, then in the same spot, just like C, that's where you can practice making these adjustments, right? So going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and feel out which one is which, right? Da, 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 right? They're just one half step apart from each other. And that difference in that change is what makes it sound like a minor third or a major third. That's why we call it that. Just know that for the second, that one's also called major because these two actually still share that major second. And there's some weirder modes that do like da 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 da. And that's that minor second thing. It's just that, I think theory over time kind of like as it developed, it was in these particular contexts and they're trying to explain it from that context. And so that's why there's sometimes it's like a little funny in terms of its names and labels, and different, like, jazz music compared to like classical music has slightly different ways that people talk about stuff. And so that can really, really throw you off. And there's different ways that we can sort of approach understanding it. So yeah, I just highly recommend. It's a really great practice to try and switch between these two patterns. And at the very least, if you're really new to all of this and it's like, that sounds way too advanced and I'm like getting self-conscious about this, again, just know it's always a process. It's like learning a language. And the first step is take any of your basic exercises that you're learning, and they're often in major for a lot of the stuff that we do, and then just try practicing switching them to a minor pattern. So like, for example, simple one, if you have like and I'm working on my vocal technique, I might go also and practice doing that, right? If you're doing something where you're going like blah 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 blah, or you can do it in minor, blah blah blah, and just get comfortable with it, because I think a lot of times we sing so much in major that we're just not used to doing the minor pattern, right? So switch your exercises to some minor patterns, and it'll start to get clearer and easier to do. And it's also just helpful to kind of change the way that you're approaching your exercises ever so subtly. Okay, so you're asking, so what I would say is learn the major pattern, and then literally just in this process, learn the major pattern, then practice just playing from 6 to 6 and change the numbers to 1 to 1, right? That's like you're practicing the relative major and the relative minor, and I think it's really good to do them together like that. And I recommend, first just practice being able to switch between those two. And then from there, all the other scale patterns are literally just swapping out one of or so of the numbers with like mixing sort of the major or minor. So for example, like Dorian, the Dorian mode is a minor scale with a raised 6. It doesn't have that minor 6 anymore. It has a major 6. So we get that da 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 da. So it gets that cool like ya da 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 da, and then switches back to minor, right? So da 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 da. That's what makes it Dorian. Mixolydian, right? These other crazy names, just a major pattern with a minor 7th added. So all of a sudden it's like na 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 na. So it's that da 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 da. And then we get that cool kind of like slightly sort of Irish sound, right? Da 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 na 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 na. So it's all just think of it as like major and minor are kind of like the main families, right? Or like a kingdom. And then from there, you can find all these sort of subtle little variations, right? Just like when we talk about harmonic minor, it's minor, but it has a major seventh. So it's all of a sudden like na 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 na. And that major seventh makes it feel totally different all of a sudden. Na 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 na. Right? Because it creates a little more space in a certain spot. Um, so I would just recommend like it's like think of major and minor as like a main context. And then you can play around with making little modifications, trying to mix and match them. And it does take a lot of focus. And then you can do it kind of like this where people will show it, right? Where they'll like put on like fancy strings or something, be like, na, 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 na. It's just minor, right? Na, 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 da, 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 da. Feeling out that pattern. And then I might switch and be like, na, 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 na. Na, 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 da, 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 da. Just practice sort of feeling out what that's like. So I highly recommend it. And then each one kind of has like a different flavor to it, right? So if I'm playing the open fifth, na 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 na, right? It sounds like it's like straight out of a movie or something. Da na 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 da da. So you might feel like, oh, this is like way too hard, but it leads to some really really cool things, right? Like over time, like just padding a single note and change ability to like change between these two modes, mix and match, gives you pretty much like all of the options you could think of. Um, yeah, descending intervals are really important. In fact, I kind of like had to skip over that just because it's like maybe we're trying to do a lot here with going between the major and minors because it starts to make us understand like everything about modes and stuff. I just want to have it out there for those of you who are like more, in more advanced practice or play other instruments. I would recommend doing the bungee scales descending, for example. So like if I'm like, oh, I should switch back to piano. So 8 8 7 8 8 7 6 7 8 8 7 6 5 6 7 8. I would do it from the top, coming down and back up. And I would do that with both of them. So like 8 8 7 8 8 7 6 7 8 8 7 6 5 6 7 8. Right. And it's again, just know that as you do this, you're gonna get your wires crossed. And sometimes you're gonna accidentally sing the wrong interval and be like, "Blah, where did I go?" Like that happened to me even here as I'm trying to like flick between them. But that's the whole point of training this, is it kind of starts to help you understand how to do that successfully. And then do the same thing like what I talked about, that pattern of then doing interval jumps. So like like 8 8 7 8 8 6 8 8 5 8. You see what I mean? I mean that's gonna be the hardest. 8 4 8 8 3 8 8 2 8 8 1. Right, that's it's gonna sort of spin your head, and you'll start to see where you have weaknesses with your intervals, and then ultimately you can just hit a note, hit the fifth, and then practice jumping from any scale degree to any other scale degree. Eventually, you'll cover all the options. So this is why I do this sometimes. I'll just sit here and be like 1 7 2 3 4 5 6 4 3 1 2 1 5 1 5 3 4 5 6 7 7 1. Right, and I'm just like looking in, thinking about that. and just trying to see if there's like an interval that I haven't jumped to, before from every other particular interval, right? And at that point, you'll cover all of these options actually that you can ever come across. It seems like maybe daunting, but over time, as you keep practicing this, you'll just get more and more fluent. And like again, if I haven't done it in a while, like I'll start to lose some of that accuracy as well. And just that makes you like a great jazzerciser, right? As a vocalist, your ability to do that is going to help you with scatting, with finding weird harmonies. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, I would just point out that like surveying and feeling out all of these different changes and sort of what the quality does and the sensation of it is, how it sort of changes, will help you with like vocalizing when like someone is like improvising crazy chord changes and things like that. You'll start to be like, oh, I feel like the whole step, or I feel like a little bit of that minor pattern right here. Just to know that like music is kind of messy, right? Like simple songs stay in major and simple songs will just stay in minor. But if you want to get cooler with it, like you can actually learn to sort of switch back and forth between them. And the way you do that again is you just play a root note or you play like an open fifth, and then you fill in the details, right? You fill in, is it like either a minor third or is it a major third? Na, 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 or na, 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 na. And that's sort of the first way to do that is just practice switching more rapidly between the two. And again, if you're not comfortable doing that, like on the keyboard, start with your exercises. So like a lot of our exercises are just these basic 5-note patterns, right? Like na 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 na, and you just switch it to na 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 na. And make sure that when you're doing your exercises, that you just regularly try to mix it up, so you just don't only get comfortable with major, because then you're missing half the equation, right? And all the other little variations that can happen. So hopefully that wasn't too much, but I want to always throw in some more theory stuff for those of you who are following at a slightly more advanced level. And just know that we'll also do some basic like working just the major scale, working just the minor scale as some of our things in the future, in like maybe next month or something like that. And we can also do learning solfege, just like, so just ask me what your questions are. You can see that this is actually really tricky to explain. And so my goal is to try and sort out some of the mess so you understand it in a larger context. So yeah, I hope that was clear enough, because so I know some people are like, I cannot follow you. Some of it comes again just from your vocal practice of singing along with the exercises until you start to understand how all the notes how they all fit together, right? Playing an instrument really, really helps. Of course, I recommend looking at a piano, even if you don't play piano, pull it up, map out these notes so you can visually point to them and practice jumping around. And don't forget to mark out where the half steps and whole steps are. So I typically use like a bracket or like a little like caret to show the difference between a whole step and a half step. Just a way to simplify, because there's some older patterns and ways that people do this, like solfege, that are really helpful, but I think ultimately are a little confusing at first. So yeah, well, so again, if you're new to this, just know that I'll do a video about basic music theory, understanding what notes are and all of that kind of stuff another time. And just keep your eyes out for that one, and I'll answer all of your questions that may have come from this. Yeah, and solfege is a great one when we're starting to think about modes and switching between major and minor. So I'll leave you with this, like, and we'll go over that whenever we do it next time. But this is why they do these sort of, I won't do the hand symbols, but they do these changes of the vowel shape to kind of help us understand the difference. So if I'm like, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, they're very bright vowels, right? Versus do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, te, do. And you can hear, right, that it was mi, la, and ti, 3, 6, and 7 were the main changes right there again, just like what I was showing. So it went from do, re, mi to do, re, mi, fa, sol, right, re, fa, so, the same. Do, re, fa, so are the same. And then do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, right? That's different. Te, do. Um, so just know that it's kind of designed for us to hear that difference and to practice changing. And all of what we're doing now is to help us better use solfege in the future. So we'll talk about that one. There's lots of cool exercises you can do, and it's just another way to approach the same concept, right? Are you using numbers, or are you using like consonant vowel shaped sort of syllable combinations? And they were just designed to help singers sort of find these out more like positions and the sort of sensation of these different shapes, smaller and bigger shapes, rather than getting too lost in the weeds. Because as singers, it's very tactile, right? We're very sensation based. And so we want to be able to feel out the shift. And it's funny when you get really good at this, you can actually hear the this shifting of modes before you even get to the notes that actually change, right? If I'm like do re mi, do re mi, do re mi, da da da. We kind of slowly like adjust our intonation, or subtly adjust it as we actually we shift, and so you'll start to actually be able to kind of like there's all these like subtle things that are happening. It kind of changes your overall approach to every pattern if you know ahead of time sort of what you're going into. So um, we'll talk about that. Solfege is very, very helpful as a pattern as well. We typically start with numbers because, as you can tell, this is really complicated when we start dealing with changing between different scales, off the same note or even in the same key, changing to different modes. And so numbers are great when you're not doing that. And just remember that some songs, most pop songs, and I'll leave with this concept, most pop songs don't change scales really. They just stay in the major scale or the minor scale the entire time. And often it's even just major pentatonic or the minor pentatonic. So it's even more simplified. Sometimes it's just 5 notes that you're singing the entire time. And so just know that this is as we get to more complicated things, right? Like film scores and cool things where you're trying to make all these cool vibes, like what I did with the string padding. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. Go over it and keep practicing it. And again, this takes a lot of work. And as we do this, sometimes we like get confused and mixed up and stuff, and that's the whole point of it. So always pleasure, and I will catch you guys next time. I think we're switching back to some more like technique or style stuff. So just dropping in a little bit of theory here and there. It's a whole wide world. Don't be scared of it. Approach it with curiosity, and there's all these cool things that you'll find. So you're very welcome, and I will catch you all next week. All right, take care.